National Fire Radio.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of the National Fire Radio podcast. Before we get started with today's episode, I just want to take a few minutes and talk about a few different things that matter. Things like thank you. Thank you to our community if you're a longtime listener or just your first or second time here on the audio platform listening to the daily podcast. We appreciate your support, becoming part of the community, and making this job better. And so with that, if you have any thoughts, ideas, critiques, people you think should be on the show, or topics or ideas that you want to send forth, your direct line to the show is through our new email, podcast@nationalfireradio.com. Send us your thoughts, ideas, people you think would be good for the show, anything that's on your mind, send it over to podcast@nationalfireradio.com. That's your direct line right to the show. On top of that, if you feel inclined, please leave a review. Give us a 5-star review. That would be fantastic, and we greatly appreciate it. We're working hard to gain your trust and to build a community, so any support that you can give us back only betters the mission. So we appreciate that. Like, subscribe, and share this with your friends and talk about it because it makes the job better. Lastly, I need to mention, we want to talk about the National Fire Radio website, www.nationalfireradio.com. That is where you can get your merchandise that supports the show and the mission and the platform of National Fire Radio. Well, enough about all that. Let's hop into the daily episode. So thanks for tuning in. See you at the next one. Now, the daily episode. Our first sponsor of the podcast, Taylor's Tins. Taylor and his crew have been manufacturing helmet fronts, aluminum helmet fronts, since 2017. Over 200,000 plus shields have been manufactured by Taylor and his crew. Custom helmet fronts shipped within 24 to 48 hours. Whether it's one piece to a 500-piece department order, they'll get them out under 2 days. They're doing incredible work, 100% customizable product. Their product is top shelf. Not only are they doing aluminum helmet fronts, they're doing gas cards, playing cards, keychains, medical cards, and charts. Pump charts, street signs, custom signs, banquet awards, you name it, they're doing it. Go to taylorstins.com, and if you do order, use this promo code, NFR sent me, all one word, NFR sent me, and you'll get 15% off at checkout. That's because we have a strong relationship and friendship with Taylor from Taylor's Tins. They've been a longtime supporter of the National Fire Radio platform, and I appreciate their support and friendship. Without further ado, the daily episode. Fire Radio, welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is going to be a lot of fun. This is a fella that I met several years ago when we first started National Fire Radio, 2017, 2018. I think a first podcast episode we did on site in 2018 with him in his workshop. And that failed miserably. The audio went out. The video went out. We had all these issues. We ended up going back a few months later, recording once again. It was an excellent episode. Rob Meyer, Ridgeway Leatherworks.
Good morning, Jeremy. How you doing?
Hey, brother. How are you?
Good. I'm actually, for everything, all things considered, I'm glad you guys came back the second time because I was definitely a little more relaxed.
It was funny. In the beginning, we used to do a lot of road trips, and, we always thought, like, video is the most important thing, and then it turns out that sound is actually the most important thing when you do podcasting. If the sound is off and it doesn't sound good, people aren't going to listen, regardless if it's video or audio. So
immediate turn off, sure.
for sure, right? And nobody wanted to see my ugly mug anyway. So the podcast platform now, it's a lot simpler because we're just doing straight audio right now. We are doing some in-field projects again of videoing and so on. But it was a lot of fun because we wanted to capture some of what you guys do at Ridgeway Leather. Before we hop into that, because today's episode is going to be fun. It's going to be a little bit different. We get a lot of feedback from our listeners in the community, the National Fire Radio community, about businesses. When we talk about business, between, how we do things at National Fire Radio and when I interview guys and they have their own businesses, it's a fun conversation because so many firefighters have their, if your career, it's your side job. Sometimes it even becomes your priority over the job just because of how busy it becomes. And then on the volunteer side, a lot of guys are entrenched in their communities. They have their own businesses or they work for somebody and they're very much involved in the business community. So business episodes are a lot of fun, and I know that you are very thorough in how you operate and who you are, and that matters, and I know that stands out. So this is going to be a great conversation, but let's just do this real quick. 22 years in the fire service, 18 years as a career fireman with Monroe, New Jersey. You and I have been friends for several years now. We catch up every few months, and it's just a lot of fun, and I miss your face, and I'm hoping to see you soon. It's been a while.
Oh Jesus! You know what? I was thinking the same thing when you know what? I'm gonna pick up the phone and say I miss your face. You know what?
Yeah.
Why do we think the same?
I do that regularly. So probably once a week, I'll randomly go through my phone, pick up somebody, and just call them. And I think I even did that to you like a year or two ago. And for me, it's just a quick 5, 7, could be an hour long phone call, but usually I'm in the car. I got 10 minutes of downtime, and so I'll just scroll through.
Just to touch base, and yeah.
Hell yeah.
Same thing.
Bro, we get so hung up on our everyday now that it's hard to make time for everybody that we know. And so if I can grab an opportunity or two, it's important to me. So
yeah,
anyway,
for sure.
So let's talk about this. Ridgeway Leatherworks, this has taken over your life. I mean, you are passionate about the fire service. You've been a fireman a long time, and I know you love the job, but you also love a hobby that turned into a very successful business, a very busy business that has lead times and personnel and people that work for you and all these things. And you've grown it in from a hobby to a business. But I want to kind of start at the beginning, Rob. Like 2015, give me a little bit of the backstory about how Ridgeway Leather came to be.
Sure. So originally, the whole concept of just working with leather, it's so leatherworking. What I thought was a very niche kind of like trade or hobby, and it still is, but it's actually become much more popular in the fire service in more recent years. It really just started with my dog. So I had a Doberman. His name was Jaeger, and I was shopping around for collars for him. He was a puppy at the time. And just the price of the dog collars in general. I'm like, you know what? I'm not a cheap guy, but I'm like, you know what? And I think a lot of people can resonate with this. I can probably do this better, or I can do this myself for cheaper. And what I didn't know at the time is I was setting myself up for just a totally different, way of life and direction, for my own life and my family's life. Of just making a collar, and it was kind of an easy thing because I had a construction background.
I was going to ask, were you always a tinkerer? Like, were you always like finding ways to do things or build it yourself? Or
not always a tinkerer, but I started in construction early on in my career in the fire service.
Yeah,
and just like everyone else, like if you have a trade, you're infinitely more valuable in the fire service if you learn something that requires working with your hands. So I already had that kind of experience of building things, creating things out of nothing, and that's kind of like that feel I give to people that come in the shop. Like you're taking raw materials and you're turning it into a finished product.
Yeah,
and that's just trade work in general. So
how satisfying is that?
It's fantastic. It really is. And I think it's kind of been dulled down over the years because I've done it so long that I don't appreciate it as much as I used to.
Yeah.
But when I bring somebody new in, or even if I have somebody, stop in the shop that really just wants to learn, and I have to go back to basics and explain to somebody or show somebody, and they get to experience going from that raw material to a finished product, I could see the appreciation in their face. Like I could definitely see the reaction. That's the same reaction that I had, when I started out. I mean, the difference is that, when I started, you spend $100 on tools and $50 on material. You don't want to screw it up, and kind of like the stakes are high, and you want to make sure that you do everything right. So there's a lot more stress coming from creating my first few projects.
Yeah.
Now it's kind of different because if I screw something up, it's a business cost. It's just something that,
wow.
it happens.
And that's when it goes from hobby to business, right?
Yeah.
It's right there.
You chalk it up to a loss, and that's really it. You move on. But I remember vividly, during my first few projects, I purchased pre-cut leather straps. They're like 4 or 5 feet long. and the object was to make sure every movement was precise, nothing I screwed up, because if I did screw it up, I'd have to pay a fortune more. And in my mind, like $15 for a leather strap was
Right.
a huge cost,
Sure.
and I didn't want to screw it up. And now, it's totally different because I have a fully functional workshop loaded with materials and equipment and machinery and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
So let me ask you, from the early onset, making that collar for Jaeger, right? And
mhm.
it's cool. I've seen it. Like it's cool. With that, when it started, I mean, how did it snowball? Did you enjoy the tinkering and the
Sure.
craftsmanship that went into the leather making, and then you were like,
Yeah.
hey, I could do this?
So the hardware, the hobby of it side of it was, not just the collar stuff. I'd like to consider myself kind of pragmatic and thinking, all right, well, I'm not going to just get into this hobby um, to make a dog collar. Like the fire service and leather kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So, it's just like, all right, if I start this project and I make a dog collar, then I'm going to be able to do different stuff too, because, I can make myself a radio strap. I can make, uh, you know, a locker tag. Like there was a ton of things that I realized that, all right, if I'm going to commit this type of money to a hobby, I can do other things. And that kind of like snowballed from coworkers and colleagues asking for things, and then friends of friends, and
Yeah.
you know
Were you
that's
working on the side during, like, because at that point you were already a career fireman, right?
Mhm.
So, were you working on the side? Were you still doing construction or other odd stuff, or were you
um
content
I
being a
was
fireman?
I was actually doing two. I was working part-time EMS,
Yeah.
and I was working with a family member flipping homes
Okay.
on the construction side. After I left, I worked with the contractor for years. And then I ended up working for family for a few years, picking up homes and flipping them, doing whatever.
So were
But
you were you looking for something? Like, did you go into the
no,
leather thinking that this could be more than a hobby, or did that just come over time as you saw
nope.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, it came over time. Like it got to a point to where I realized that the flip jobs were like, all right, well, you're getting hired for a month and you're working, you're busting your ass and you're working, and then you'd work EMS for the rest of it. And then I realized, like, I'm trying to I realized I was falling behind on some of the leather work, and I just couldn't keep up. I couldn't,
Yeah.
do the work that I was doing. And then finally I realized, all right, well, I need to shave off everything. Just basically go to the firehouse and work on the leather work. And, and again, I was working out of a single car garage. It was just me. And then I had some help, and, I hired a friend to help. And, it just became something that I really couldn't keep up with unless I devoted my part-time gig solely to be the business.
So then that tells me then that you're in over your head as a hobby, thinking it's still a hobby, and then all of a sudden one night you wake up and go, "Holy shit, this is a real business."
I want to. I'd love to say it was overnight. It
Well,
took a long time.
but you know what
It,
I'm saying, right? Like,
yeah, yeah.
we fall so in love with the process and the actual making of the product, and seeing the excitement on people's faces when you deliver it. And I know, listen, I have a lot of this too with National Fire Radio. Was when we
Mhm.
first started, it was fun. I mean, I'm still enjoying it, but it was fun to see I would give stuff away. We'd go on site, we'd do things, we promote people, we did all this shit, right? And it
Mhm.
was like, for me, the satisfaction was truly the gratitude and the exposure. And that's
Yep.
what worked. That was okay for me. And then all of a sudden, I woke up one day, or I guess over time, but I want to say it was one day, like you said, and and all of a sudden, I'm like, holy shit! Like, no, we need to do better at this, because this is now something much more than just a hobby.
Uh-huh.
And so, talk to me a little bit about that aha moment you had.
To find a specific aha moment would
Mm,
kind of be weird, but
I get that.
it it was really, geez, it was really a point of just understanding, like, follow, like, I think the biggest part of realizing how much the business had involved or evolved would be just falling behind, and realizing that, putting the effort, the hours that I was putting in just wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And we were constantly just trying to play catch up. And I can remember in my old house, we were, we were just, during the holidays, our first holiday season, I was so inundated with orders, and it wasn't me being used to that type of volume,
Yeah.
that, like, my garage looked like a collier's mansion. There was leather everywhere. There was hardware everywhere. like there was just, and it became one of those moments where I realized that, it's something has to change. We had to do better. It's not just about, like the hobby that I thought it was. And, we slowly adapted. We added people, we added help, and, we bought more machinery. And that was one of those things I alluded to earlier, is that, investing in the company was a very fortunate thing that I was able to do early on, because I had the fire service business,
Yeah.
or the employment. So I didn't have to pay my bills based on the business. And I think that's something it's rare, and it's very fortunate for us, is that I was able to invest the profits from the first couple of years of the business back into the business.
Yeah,
So
I mean that's a great opportunity to have. I think what's interesting about this is that I think about a lot of guys that start, a lot of people that are going to listen to this have a side business, right? They're landscapers, carpenters,
sure.
plumbers, whatever, painting, power washing, right? Whatever. Right. And so many guys inside and outside of the job have businesses that they are, one, they're important to them. And two, it brings in that added revenue that they need to survive, because most career fire jobs in this country do not pay enough to make it a career. It's a
Yeah,
job
for sure.
because it just doesn't pay enough. Right.
Yep.
And so when you look at that, I think about how many guys have gone into, they fell in love with the fire service. They're enamored by it. They fall in love with the fire service. They love the firehouse, but they realize it's not sustainable in a way that it will give them the living they want to provide for themselves or their family. So they need to have a second or third job that can bring in additional income. And so with that, though, a lot of these guys and girls don't have business experience prior to their fire service career. A lot of guys are getting hired in their early 20s and so on. So you never really had the opportunity, unless you were a true entrepreneur at that time, to develop a business and learn the ins and outs. And I think that's a huge challenge. And I think we need to do better at educating our own people about the ins and outs of businesses and starting them, because I feel that so many people fall into pitfalls very early on because they're not educated in the process. What are some ideas from you that I think could help people, or some things? Because like you and I were talking about it before we started. We talked about P&Ls. We talked about taxes. We talked about, even using an accountant and invoicing and all these things that come with the process of running a business. But the accountability on the business side is the most unsexy shit you could possibly do as a business owner, right? And
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually, it's funny too, because we'll go back to like my buddy Chris being very, very pragmatic, very,
Sure.
very detail oriented, things like that. When I first started out, he kind of looked at me and I'm explaining like what I'm doing, and he just like, "Are you serious?" Like, he's like, "That's not how you like." And he's saying he obviously he was figuring it out too, probably 6 months to a year before I was doing my whole business venture. And like he had a very good grasp of what's required, because he's very detail oriented, likes to read. Again, all like I'd be surprised if he doesn't read the terms of services, of any app that he downloads. And I'm not that guy.
I'm not either.
So, but it's easy enough, and what I've relied on for years, and it's not something that is always available to other people. What I've relied on for years is my network around me. So I've always kind of like,
Yes.
if I know that there's business owners around me that I work in
Yes.
the firehouse, or that I would volunteer with, they would be my resource to kind of ask and get a gauge on what should I be doing, what's expected as a business owner, especially starting out. I mean, like depending on what state you're starting a business in, they do a really good job of laying it out, but you have to be able to dive into all of the nuances and specifics to be able to understand it.
I think the
And
other thing too, Rob, is you got to check your pride, man. Like that was a
Mhm.
struggle for me, is really starting to identify what I'm not strong at as a business
Yep.
owner. Right? You can't be good at everything. And so I wrote down a couple notes while you were talking. Mentorship, just like the fire department, right? When you said that you found some people that were in business that you could lean on and ask questions. First off, get out of your own space and understand that you don't have all the answers. So go find people that do. It's just like the fire service. Find a mentor or two on the business side that can help tutor you to be a good business owner or operator. It's hugely important.
we were literally just having that conversation in the firehouse. My last shift
Yeah.
was we were talking about just officers and doing whatever. And the concept came about of, if you walk in and you're an officer and you present yourself to know everything, you better know everything.
Yeah.
The best officers I've worked for are the ones that can put aside the fact that they don't know everything, and they can lean on the strengths of their crew, to be able to, all right, listen, I may not be a hazmat tech, but my senior man is, so all of a sudden when you're going over hazmat, let the senior man talk about, all that, the hazardous material stuff.
Yeah.
And that kind of like, that translates into, the business side too, where I know when I started, I knew absolutely nothing. And even today, like I'm definitely willing to take advice from
Hell
another
yeah.
business owner or somebody else. You don't even have to own a business. If you have the knowledge of something that I don't, I want to hear it. And if
Yes.
it's, if you're wrong, that's great. If you're right, it's even better. At least I have a kind of like a counter opinion or point that I can start researching off of. So yeah, it's one of those things where, having a social network is really great, and the fire service is really good at that. Whether you're a career volunteer, there's people there that have experiences. When I started, it was the experiences that I was looking at were the trade experiences. I'd like to know, you know, I want to learn about HVAC stuff. I want to learn about plumbing and things like that.
Right.
Now it's a little bit different. Life has changed. I want to learn about running a business a little bit
Yeah.
better than I do now.
Yeah.
So, and it
Yeah.
comes with time or age or whatever. I mean, there's 20-year-old entrepreneurs that want to
Sure.
change the world, and then there's 50-year-old guys that are just getting into it.
Well, and I think
So
that's an interesting conversation too, because did you have a real good idea of what and how you wanted to do this and what it was going to look like? I mean,
no,
because yeah, exactly, right.
flying by the seat of my pants, my friend.
And but no, and listen, man, trust me, I do that all day long with certain
Yep.
things. But there has to be that foundation, right?
Yes.
Like, and I know that you're methodical. As much as you fly by the seat of your pants, I know that you're very methodical too, and you're very protective of the business and your brand
Mhm.
and how you operate and the relationships you make and all those things. I know that
Mhm.
that's very important. So a strong base as a business owner is critical.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, okay, what else then? Talk to me. What else about business? I mean, profit and loss and taxes and all these things that we need to know. We need to surround ourselves with good people. What's the next step as a business, as a business owner? Some trials, tribulations, things that you've learned, things that you think back and go, oh, we made it through that one, or holy, you know what I'm saying?
So I've got an excellent. And it's actually worked a little bit more in my personal life too. Sometimes it's easier to get to a point to where you should just pay somebody that's better at doing
Yes.
that. So we're like, for in my case, an accountant, that was very simple. I had an accountant that was doing my taxes and things like that before I opened up the business. But my bookkeeper was the next biggest step, and she's helped me out and really kind of cleaned house as far as the financial side of it, and made a much clearer picture of what we're doing. I mean, shit, my first year, and again, not being business savvy, I think, hell, what did I tell one of my friends? All right, he goes, "How's the business doing?" I'm like, "I don't know. I keep putting money in my account, so we're doing all right." So,
Oh my God, that is the same conversation that I think most of us have, man.
yeah. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
never sat there and focused on on numbers, and like I never had to worry about labor costs. And I mean, still, like, obviously I do now, but like how that compares to gross revenue and things like that. There comes a point in time where you realize that you have to start paying attention to these metrics
yes,
that didn't exist prior to. And like, starting a small business and watching it grow from a hobby to a business, it was a little bit easier because you can kind of grow with the business. How someone would jump into a business like that and be expected to know or do all that stuff from the get-go. Like if you open up a restaurant and
yeah,
you have labor right out of the gate, you have all your profit and loss, you have waste and things like that you have to account for. I don't know how anyone would be able to stay on top of that. Some people are really great at it, me not so much.
yeah.
But I
I
mean, the go ahead.
no, you keep going, keep going.
But the shining example of that is if you're doing something and you're making money off of it, you have that leisure, that luxury, that kind of like that space to be able to to figure that out down the line.
Yeah.
And that's where that conversation, oh, well, how's the business doing? Oh, there's more money in the account than there was last month.
Yeah, exactly. We're paying our bills.
That soft little figure it out, kind of a couple of months, and in some cases, or some people, it could take years, but that's
it's really it's really good advice though, Rob, about when you have to look at things and get to that point where you go, it's sometimes you're just better off paying somebody to do that work for you because that's their realm. And I think that's when self-awareness matters, right? Because I think about, this whole conversation is geared towards firefighter owned businesses, right? And so, we're doing that to bring in typically additional revenue to our family so we can live a better life or cover the bills that we have, right? And that comes with stability. And if you're running your business but you don't have a good handle on what you're doing, you're not stable. And cash flow matters, and building a business that matters. The last thing you want to do is build a business and 5 or 6, 7 years in, there's tax issues because you finally went to go address it, and all of a sudden you gotta pay $25,000 in back taxes or something. There's an issue there, and I think
there was
go ahead.
There was something in New Jersey, I want to say 5 years ago, where they did an audit of small businesses and saying, they looked and see who was filing their quarterly taxes, and, all of a sudden people were being assessed, and at very least one person that I worked with, or I work with currently, he was on the hook for a few $1,000s just because he didn't know, or he just, whatever the case, whatever the specifics are.
Right.
And that's where you have to really just kind of realize that, what's your time worth? What's your energy worth? Like the bookkeeper, the accountant, they know tax law, they know what's supposed to be done. You're going to spend hours figuring out what's expected of you as a business owner.
Right.
And, I could never tell you what my hourly rate is. If I really wanted to try, I could, but if I would have to spend the time researching what it takes to do all the things that my bookkeeper does, there's a reason why she's in business is because it's not worth my time. And that's what it boils down to, is that if you're doing well enough that your business requires that type of activity on the financial side, it sucks to pay people to do something that you could do. Again, I have a construction background, but I will pay somebody to paint my bathroom tomorrow.
That's right. Absolutely.
And it's so silly and stupid, and it took a while to come. It took a while to come to grips with that. But in the end, if you're doing well, your time is valuable, and you have to realize what your time is worth and what's it worth to bring somebody in to do something that you could be doing things otherwise.
Yeah. Do you love it? Like, do you still love it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you love the process?
Yes.
Like, what is it? Is it the product? Is it the process? Is it all of it? Like, what about your business? Is it the blood, sweat, and tears that you've put in for the last 8 years? Like, what is it that pushes you to want this to keep succeeding and going?
I think it's almost the whole package. So obviously I appreciate and I love the fact that it's created, it's put me into it's put me into a situation financially that I could never imagine. Like we're in a much better place from working, 2 or 3 other jobs kind of here and there. But I love every bit of it. More times than not, I'm chained to the paint table because that's where my experience or my skills can't really be duplicated.
It's a steady hand. I tried it at your place. I was terrible. It's hard. It's so hard.
But it can't. So that's where I normally do. So when I normally get back into, when I get the opportunity to create stuff, and do stuff that I don't normally do, that's where like I really start to, it reinvigorates,
That's
what
cool.
we do, why we do it.
Are you naturally creative?
No,
you're not.
I could never color in between the lines when I went to school. So this is all new to me, being able to be artistic or creative, or even to be considered as such. It just kind of ended up being that way once I started getting into leatherwork and doing those type of things. I mean, we talked about it too. The first thing that I painted that I still have in my shop is just a nightmare, and it takes years. And that's where, like, if you're, and for anyone listening, if you get into any type of job or vocation where you create things, your first few projects, either take a picture if it's not yours and you don't get to keep, take a picture, and if you're a woodworker, whatever, keep it. Just,
Yeah.
it's just to be able to look back and see how far you've come
Oh
from
yeah.
the nightmares of where you started. It is really gratifying, and it's something that I wouldn't trade. That whole, everything that I do now, and being able to compare that to my first few projects is so rewarding. It really is, to see how you've come and how many times. And it takes hundreds or thousands of projects to really get
Yeah.
to where, to where you're at. But I'm definitely able to appreciate, the amount of time that it takes for a craftsman, or somebody in a trade, to be able to perfect their work. So
I think too. Just I mean, I've seen your work. I've seen it all over. I've been to your shop. I see what you guys do. The craftsmanship is unbelievable. But I think that's what's got to be so satisfying. Like my craftsmanship, and Rob and the guys from the team here. Like ours is just this content delivery, talking to people, forming relationships, doing marketing projects for different manufacturers, all these things, right, that we do. And I get a lot of satisfaction out of the creative. And then when we execute and deliver, like, I just love that. I love seeing that all that hard work pays off, and that there's something to show for it. And like you said, the longevity of it is where we were 5 years ago from today. It's like night and day difference, and it's fun to watch the evolution of that. But for you guys have a handcrafted item, and I got to think that that's exciting when you see your radio strap in the wild, if you will, or you see a flashlight holder or a glove holder or whatever, whichever, somebody purchases from your company, right?
100%.
To see that craftsmanship out there, and people are relying on that piece of equipment, and you put your flair to it, your design, your take, that's got to be really satisfying.
Some of the coolest stuff I've seen is either watching the news, or like getting some, like, in service, like, just seeing some firefighter photos of say some 5 alarm fire somewhere that's getting shared all over the place, and just seeing one of those names that you could recognize and look at your product and you go, you know what, I made that.
Yeah, it's cool.
The other thing is coworkers. So some of my coworkers, they're, I personally, at least the way they make it seem, like they're very proud of what I have going on. One of my coworkers was out in Disney a year ago and whatever, and just happened to see something. They saw a radio strap, and they asked, is that Ridgeway? And they go, yeah. And the guy's like, he seemed really hyped that, I work with that guy. Like,
so cool.
How cool is that? There's tons of, like, there's tons of those moments where, especially because we're fortunate enough to build the brand and get the products out to a lot of emergency service workers, that they start popping up out of nowhere. I thought one of the weirder times when I first started my business was, I didn't remember making a product. Like, I don't remember that name, but it was one of mine. So that's where I realized that, holy shit, am I getting to that point to where I'm stamping letters, and I don't know, because I used to remember every single one of my customers' names. And it got to a point to where I didn't remember them. And then it came full circle, and I realized that, I remember more names now than I did prior to, when I started forgetting it, because, I don't know, it's just, I look at, even when I'm working through products, I see the addresses, I kind of see where they're going, and I look at names, and, all those things kind of come full circle, and it's really cool to see where some things are going. And, a lot of
The
big
reach,
cities,
right? The
yeah,
reach.
yeah.
So
A lot of big cities, different countries.
How are you getting your reach? Talk to me a little bit on the business aspect of the marketing. Is it a word of mouth? Is it social media? Is it the trade shows? Because I know you only do a couple shows a year.
Yeah.
And what I love too is talking with you. You're like, that show's not worth it for us. We're not gonna get the return out of it. And that's that business owner conversation too, is understanding where you get the most value and where your money is well spent.
Yeah.
And
a lot of that's trial and error. So social media, we live and die by it. I've actually been a little bit lax in social media more recently, just because
I didn't want to say anything. I just,
we're just, but you know what though? Like, it sounds so stupid, but we're so busy that I am the social media guy. So I take all the pictures, I make all the posts. When your life completely, like when I first started, and when we started growing, I love social media, and I
Yeah.
still do,
That's how we
but
met.
like and that's it. So it's almost eventually there's some burnout, or eventually like I'm taking the same photos and things
Sure.
like that, and it's tough to take the time to be creative when you're just always swamped with work.
I get it.
But yeah, for like as far as marketing, live and die by social media.
Yeah.
If you're not on, even Instagram now, I'm kind of burnt out on Instagram. It's more like TikTok now. It's really, which is
Hmm.
the next best thing. But if you're not on social media as a business owner, you're foolish, because that's really, why would you pay for advertising?
Yeah.
I get calls and emails about putting my business in print ads for magazines all the time, and I think like there's no value there. Like, why would I spend $500 on a magazine when I could just sit there and just post relentlessly for free on social media,
With a broader
before I do
reach.
yeah, before I do anything else, with a much bigger reach.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that's different now, now that the business has grown, is that I find myself investing in just more charitable causes. So,
Yeah, it's nice.
so some of those, it's one thing to make a product. Like, I can give away a radio strap for a good cause, but things like there's the Eckerd class coming up next month that you guys are a part of.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a sponsor for there. It's different to write a check and physically give them money versus just making product. I
Sure.
mean, you're obviously giving away something one way or the other, but it's different, and it's a little more. Um, it feels better to be able to be a sponsor and directly kind of helping out,
Well,
things
you
like that.
become part of the experience, right? And I think
Mhm.
that's what matters, because part of marketing, what a lot of people don't understand, is everybody's always on the constantly selling. And
Mhm.
I think the best way to sell is to sell without selling, meaning become involved in the community, entrench yourself in the community and the people that use your product, and get to know
Mhm.
them and who they are, and let them become, let them get to know you and your brand, and they understand who you are, the products you build, and if your products are good enough, they will sell.
Yeah.
And that's a hard conversation for a lot of people to understand. The other thing too, and I wanted to ask you along those lines, I mean, you're 8 years in now, right? 2015,
Mhm.
we're at 2023, if I could do math correctly, right? So we're at 8 years in. That's a big thing for me this morning to do math. But whatchamacallit? And so, hang on one second. Okay. And so because of that, like for me, I put a post out this morning where I talked about the long play, the long game,
Mhm.
and legacy. Legacy matters to me. Like, I want to be able to walk away from all this and know that I made an impact and made a difference. And it's not about that short-term return that is dollars or
Mhm.
attention. It is really a long-term play. And I watch so many people. I mean, like you said, when you first started, there was a handful of leather guys, right? How many leather
Mhm.
guys are out there now?
I couldn't even keep count. We were just
Right?
and there was just a post about that, and like, some, like, for a number of years, and again, this is 8 years. I'm not 20 years deep into this.
Sure.
8 years ago, I could probably tell you there was maybe a dozen or
Right.
more companies doing it.
Right.
I could tell you there's probably 100, 200 companies at least doing it, and some of them like I've never heard of before. And I mean, I think it's great because, first of all, they're not taking away business from me. I always think that there's more than enough business to go around.
I believe in
So
that. Yeah.
yeah, so there's not, it's never some like, it's, at least in my mind, there's never a competition that this person is taking away from what I'm selling. I mean, I'm selling more than I need. I can deal with right now. So why that's not an issue for me.
Yeah.
Um, but some of these, it's cool to think that some of these companies that are just starting out are in the same place that I was 8 years ago. They have their business name. Like, they learned how to work with leather. They have their business name. They're trying to get their name out. They're building a social media presence. And that's something that, like, I was there. I remember it very distinctly. It wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
That to be in that stage of a business owner.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
How about relationships? We talked about mentorships. What about relationships? Other guys that own shops that are reputable. I mean, obviously,
Mhm.
in any industry, and this goes for what we do too with social media and podcasting. There's reputable and there's not, right? And
Mhm.
it goes with the same in any industry. Same with fire companies and firefighters. You're either reputable or you're not. Talk to me a little bit about that process. How important is it for you to have like-minded guys that are in the leather industry that you can, is there a group of you that lean on each other, you talk to each other, or is it straight out competition, or you just don't have any interest?
So early on, I definitely, when I was trying to figure stuff out,
Yeah.
there was, it became very clear there was very few companies that were for themselves and didn't really want to share. From
Got it.
the leather service worker perspective,
Yeah.
there's a ton of guys that all talk together, whether it's in groups or individually. You know, even if you were to remove the fire service in general out of leatherwork, if you go into just leatherworking in general, it's a very open sharing community.
Right.
It's really cool, and it's I think it's rare by comparison to other vocations or businesses where there is competition. And if you're a local guy and are you going to share something with the plumber, the other fire service plumber next to you that's going to get the job over you. For us, and I've always held the idea that there's more than enough work to go around.
Yeah.
So I think all of us, or a majority of us, we're all cordial. We all talk. Hell, I think it was just so happened Jay and Stacy from Get Hose Apparel. They were in Universal last week while we were.
Oh, that's cool.
We were landing in Florida, and they were on their last day. It was pretty cool to be able to. I wish we would have been able to kind of touch base and get together. But
Yeah.
we're all there. There's a bunch of us that over the years have created and fostered some really great relationships. And it's I don't know, it's weird. It's so I've spoken to some leather workers that I kind of feel like, oh, I wish I was in Jersey because you have all these really great social media influencers near you. And like my response was, yes, the proximity is really convenient, but it's because it's easy to strike up a conversation and become friends with you.
Yeah.
You being Jeremy, just like anyone else. Like it's easy. Like if you're an easygoing person and you're outgoing, it's very easy to kind of make those relationships. It doesn't
Sure
have to
is.
be. It like proximity definitely helps a little bit, but
Well, and it
some of the
certainly matters about the individual. I mean, you got to be a stand-up guy.
yeah.
When you go into any type of relationship, whether it's friendships, boyfriend girlfriend, right, girlfriend girlfriend, boyfriend boyfriend, whatever the relationship is, or
Yeah.
business relationships, go
Yeah.
into it with an open mind and be transparent and authentic and honest, and you get good returns on relationships like that. It's what you invest into a relationship is what you're going to get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that I'm a decent judge of character, so you can kind of feel out some of the people that have,
For sure.
not dubious intentions, but you could see they're all about, furthering their company, and that's it. Like their objective is to make sure that they can benefit off of you.
Yeah.
And that's not what I'm looking for in
That's
life.
hard, man. That's hard. And I think too, it's a really interesting conversation. I'd love to dive down this hole a little bit with you real quick when it comes to this, right? I think today we are looking for answers quicker than ever, and nobody has the patience to learn through trial and error. And so there are some things that we can Google and find out right away. Right? Like you can Google how to you can go on YouTube and learn how to do a leather radio strap. But,
no, you can't.
Well, no, but here's my point.
I love the topic, but go ahead.
Well, maybe not a leather radio strap. You know how to fix your small motor on your lawnmower.
Yes.
But do you know the intricacies of actually turning that wrench or changing that spark plug or doing those things? You can watch it on a video and you can learn. And so we have the ability today more than ever in life to get instant answers, but you still have to do the work to learn that. So you learn through blood, sweat, and tears of perfecting the craft, and you're still perfecting it every single day, I have to think, because when you're a craftsman, you're never perfect, right? So you're always honing your skills and getting better. But I think like newer people, younger people have to realize that there are still some things in this world that you have to put the time in. You have to have patience to learn the process and learn how to do it. And with time comes betterment of whatever you're trying to do. We can't forego that process.
Yep, that's very relatable, at least in the leather world. So I kind of use that. I'm glad we, without even going down this road, I'm glad we did.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take much to take as a leather worker. If you want to learn how to make leather products, it doesn't take much to take a brand X radio strap, lay it down, take the measurements out, and copy exactly what's in front of you.
Yeah.
What I found in the leather world, what people don't really do or they don't want to do, is learn how to make a radio holster. the reason why they can't do that is because there's more than just laying out things flat and doing whatever. There's patterning in the leather world. If you're making gun holsters, if you're making radio holsters, whatever the case may be, it's considered patterning, and that's really, it's almost like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Is if you're gonna be a craftsman and you're gonna start to make your own things, the first thing or the only thing I see leather workers that are firefighters struggle with are making radio holsters. Why? Because the radio holsters that are around us are already assembled and they can't figure it out without taking it apart. So, I mean, I've had my design is not originally my own, but I figured it out by a lot of leather workers. They use cardboard or construction paper, but that's the whole concept of patterning, is making a shape, design, figuring out where the hole spacing is.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I've had at least two leather workers buy a holster from me and then just copy it just because they were able to take it apart and just copy the measurements.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
It's one of those shitty things where, these were guys that I was helping, they would ask me questions every day. But one of those things where like, they're just like, oh man, I wish I could figure out this whole holster thing. And I'm like, oh, don't worry, you'll get it. And like, trying to coach them into patterning, because patterning is a huge part of the creation process. They just wanted that Amazon of, all right, well, somebody, give me that template. I will literally pay you to give me your template. And the answer is no. It took me 20 hours to perfect, whatever I did. And why would I give it to you? So that is being missed.
That's this conversation, right? It's like taking the easy way out to get the answer to start producing. But I have to think this, Rob, and I'd love to hear your take on this. Anybody that's looking for shortcuts along the way, right, typically aren't in it for the long game. They're in that for that short term, return, that short return that they can get. And they're not in it for the long game. They're not in it for legacy. They're not in it to build a brand of crafts and learn the trade, learn the craftsmanship of it. And I think that's where I struggle with this. And I relate everything back to the fire service. And it's the same thing in the firehouse, right? I talked about the other day, we're 5 years in with National Fire Radio. And in 5 years in the fire service, you think you're a fucking rock star. All of a sudden, 5 years in the fire service, we start thinking that we've done it all, we've seen it all, and I can coast, and I'm going to become complacent, and I'm going to, because you learn the trade, but you haven't matured in the trade yet. And so I think that's that disconnect, and that's what I find troubling is that, and then not only that, Rob, but take it one step further, the lack of respect for the OGs or the people that have been there before us and the commitment and dedication and hard work they've put in to perfect their craft. And then we're just going to rip that off.
Yeah.
That pisses me off.
There's a number of, and to put it into leather terms, there's guys like FD Leather, and there's Leatherhead Concepts. Those guys were there long before me. And, they did a really good job of, creating the products they do.
Right.
And again, I talk to Brian from FD Leatherworks all the time. He's he's a retired guy from Orlando. Yeah. There are just stand-up business owners like those guys. You can find, or you can see you see them coming a mile out. And those are the guys that I consider myself from a business perspective in my inner circle, because, you find those guys that are in it for creating, and they obviously the goal is to make a buck too, don't get me wrong, but they're not there to try to corner the market, so to speak. And just like in the fire service, if you're the senior guy, you've been doing it forever, you shouldn't be cornering the market of knowledge either, sharing it, obviously.
That's right.
And then you do have your guys that are coming out out of nowhere, those 2, 3, 4 year guys, just like in the business world, thinking that or trying to perceive that they run the show, or they're the next best thing.
Yeah. I love waking up in the morning, looking in the mirror, and I have this twinge of like, hey man, we've made it. We're doing this. We're doing that. I had a call today with this guy, or we're working with this company, and you have this twinge of like, hey, we've made it, and then that sets in for a second. And then right after that comes this wave of like, you ain't shit, man. Like you got such a long way to go. And that's that internal struggle. And I think it's like that devil and angel that sits on the shoulders of you, right?
Mhm.
Like, and it's like, what voice do you want to listen to? And that short term is, hey man, if I can learn how to make that radio holster quicker, right?
Mhm.
I can make more money faster.
Yes.
But what did you do to the process and how did you get there? And at the end of the day, you're going to look in the mirror and say, I earned this. I worked on this. This is mine. I crafted this and I deserve whatever my return is. Instead of saying, I took this, I stole this, and now look at the money I'm making. But you know what's going to happen if you take shortcuts like that up front? You're going to take shortcuts like that your whole fucking career.
Yeah.
And truthfully, you're going to be that guy that skips on the taxes, skips on the book, your accountant. You're going to skip on paying your people. You're not going to pay a bill. You're going to like that's really how I believe in this.
I think those type of people though, like that type of mentality is just them. It'll
Yes.
always be lost on them,
Yes.
and like there's a reason why they take shortcuts. There's a reason
Yes.
why they do all that is because that's in their nature. It may not be their fault. It may be a matter of how they were brought up, or maybe they decide that low hanging fruit is the best hit of dopamine that they're going to get, and they want it again.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is like having that sense of satisfaction of creating something, whether it's whatever you make as a craftsperson or
I love that.
as a business owner. To me, there's probably no better feeling than being able to do that. And I mean, aside from the feedback I think is the biggest part is, you spend all of that time, and at least in my world, you spend all that time creating, getting better at it, honing your craft, your skill, and someone turns around and just blasts you with with a positive review and things like that. That just makes it seem like everything that we're doing is worth it. And that's no different in the fire service too. You train, you learn your job, you get good at it, you do something at a scene that creates a positive effect. And I mean, you obviously don't need the applause or whatever the case may be, but a positive outcome is really what you're shooting for, right?
100%. Yep.
So for us, like that's the end result is, everything that we do, that we get a positive feedback or outcome from, we know we're doing it for a reason. And everything that we've done up until that point is for that reason, so.
Yeah.
And that's no different than the fire service. You get to learn your job, you train, you get the job done. Nobody expects to thank you, and that's fine. But in the end, when you hop off the truck and it becomes muscle memory, you know exactly what you need to do, and everything, all things considered, whether it's a good or a bad outcome, you did your job. That's really the most gratifying, that's the most gratifying part of the job.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, I always think about like personal growth, and it's like, how was my day today? What did I get out of today? And did it make me better for tomorrow? And as corny as that sounds, it doesn't have to look like that, but it kind of does. Like in my world, it's like, what lesson did I learn today? What conversation did I have today? Like talking to you today for the last hour has been a lot of fun, because from a business perspective, it's fun for me to sit back and hear you talk about it. And I go, yep, I know what he's talking about. Yep, I've been there. Yep. Oh, that's a new one. Like, that's a good idea. Let me write that down. Like,
Yep.
And I work with so many guys that have business. I think of all the firefighter-owned businesses of guys that I know, I've helped promote over the years, people I've talked to, the relationships we've made. And I am so much better because of that. And I think to go back to what you said just a little while ago, the importance of relationships. If you're going to have relationships, make them count.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't. We were for Long Branch, I think in September. Andy and James from Accent Threads, they came out
For the cigar
yeah,
event. I gotta
yeah,
make it down there, man. I wish I didn't make it. I couldn't make it last year.
They came, but it was, you should have. You know what? So they came out from Indy. They flew
awesome.
in. They went to New York for the day. They saw. I think they went to go see a Yankee game. But that was like one of those moments. Like, all right, cigar dinner's over. We went to a bar, like an after party type thing, and we're all sitting there just ponied up to the bar, just like talking business, like from one business owner to the next, and like sharing our stories and our experiences. Like you could see James, like he's looking at Andy, go, I'm telling you, it's like he's telling, like this is the same shit we're talking about.
Yeah.
So all of those experiences are kind of mimicked across business owners' worlds, and it's really great to be able to have those connections and and reach out, especially with you guys too, like to be able to talk about, the trials and tribulations of starting a business, running
Yeah.
it, staying relevant for that reason. It's really cool to be able to have those shared experiences and stories.
I couldn't agree. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's the relationships you make is what you take with you. And when you're in it for the long term and you're playing, it's a legacy play, and you want to leave it better than you found it. The relationships you make along the way is what influences that. And I couldn't agree with you more. Let me ask you this: what's next for you guys, Ridgeway? So we didn't even talk about the product offerings, but I mean, you guys are a custom leather shop as well. Talk to me a little bit about what the future looks like for Ridgeway.
So the future is keeping up what we're doing because we're so busy with what we're doing now. We do have a couple ideas for some products in the future. One or two I think are really cool. I don't want to kind of let
I get that.
them go
That's
just
fine.
now, but but yeah, we're the future of Ridgeway is maintaining how stupidly busy we've for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Knowing that people continue to buy our products because of the quality that we put out, and I think that the fact that we're so busy kind of mirrors or mimics that whole concept, that the idea is to create a superior product to what's on the market.
Yeah.
And second most importantly is to follow up on it if there's any issues. My cornerstone of my business is if there's any warranty issue, I'd rather lose money or not make as much money on a product, and making sure that I have a happy customer. And I think that is something that's really lost on some business owners. They don't want to see the red in their balance sheet. But companies like Craftsman, or originally Craftsman or Leatherman, where if there's ever an issue, no questions asked, just deal with it.
Right.
And I think to me that type of stuff resonated with me because they'll never they'll remember what you buy and they're happy with what they got, but they'll remember more how you handled something when something went wrong.
100%.
So yeah, so that's to me, that is, I never expect anything to go wrong with my products, but the cornerstone of my business is, I'm not in it to, I'm not in it to get rich. I want to make sure I put my name on everything.
Yeah, I love that.
So I wanna make sure that my reputation and the products that I make, I stand by.
Yeah.
So that to me is a very important thing. And as a business owner, whether you're hammering nails or you're sweating copper pipe, you have to stand by whatever you do. And that's kind of like that's an important part of running a business. You have to be able to make sure what you're putting out, you put your name to.
And
if something goes wrong, stand by it.
It should be said too that the easiest business to grow is existing business.
Yeah.
It costs money to attract new business, but when you have somebody in the pipeline, and this is just common business sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, look at your product offerings and look at your services and determine what else you can sell your customer that's already there. The easiest business to gain and grow is existing business.
I have a ton of repeat customers, and it's funny. We have a mutual friend that years ago, early on in our friendship, he had said, "I already have a radio strap from you.
Yeah.
What else am I? What else? Like, what am I going to buy from you?" Meaning, like, it was almost kind of implied, like, "All right, well, you don't offer a ton of products, so like, you already have my business. Then what?" Well, unfortunately, I love him to death. He was wrong because, one, obviously people buy multiple, products. They're repeat purchasers.
That's right.
Or really the word of mouth, the recommendation, the review, you may not need another one, but the 50 people around you may need it.
That's
and
right.
if you blow them out of the water with what you provide, guess whose name they're going to drop when somebody else mentions it.
That's
in
right.
Conversation.
100%. Could not agree with you more. Well, Rob, thank you, brother. What a great conversation today about business and firefighter-owned businesses. I think people are really going to get a good takeaway from this episode, man. And I appreciate you just spending an hour with me today talking about what you do.
Yeah, I could talk leather until I'm blue in the face, but I think that the whole business conversation is really probably the more pertinent information, or things that were my experiences where, we can just go on and on about. There's so much of a learning curve in terms of starting a business that, most people really just aren't even prepared for. And before they realize it, they're behind the eight ball. So,
and I think that's the takeaway from this episode is that, like there's so many parallels between a business and the firehouse. And, find a mentor, find people that are like-minded, find people that can help tutor you in your and let your ego, put your ego aside and your pride and admit that you don't know everything, and go find people that can help you in those areas. Because ultimately, starting a side business outside of the firehouse, or even if it's your main business, if you're a volunteer fireman at your main company, find people to help support you in the mission, because that's your livelihood. And it freaking matters, man.
And those resources, for the most part, are readily available. Most people that are doing something, obviously, like unless you're in a volunteer house or a career house, and you live in town, and you want to be a carpenter, and you're trying to ask another carpenter, firefighter, how to run a business. Like there's no reason why most people wouldn't share. Yeah. People love to share what they know. That's right. I don't want to. It's almost instinctive. I've never asked a business question where someone was really hesitant to kind of answer it, because people love to share what knowledge they have, and it's there. Like there's just an endless bound of resources around you, and it's all about tapping into it. And the most important part is to ask the question from the get-go. Yeah. If you don't ask it, you're not gonna get an answer.
And surround yourself with people that are willing to talk and work with you, because ultimately, like anybody that's willing to have that conversation with you or help you or give you advice is somebody that wants you to succeed. And too often people hang out with losers that hold them back. Get away from the losers and start surrounding yourself with people that want you to succeed.
Yep. So that old adage, sit at the table with winners. The conversation's different.
Oh, I love that, dude. Wait, hold on. I got to put that down. Sit at the table with winners. Sit at the table with winners. What?
The conversation's different. If you surround yourself with people that are just going to talk shit about you or whatever you're doing, you're in the wrong company. You want to be around people that want to see you succeed, and those people are going to be those resources and tools to provide you to, not even whether it's factual information or just the mindset, just to put you in that right frame of mind of, I can do this.
I have to tell you, I love that quote. Love that quote. That's awesome. And that's how we're going to sum it up, man. Sit at the table with winners. The conversation is different. That's freaking awesome. Rob, thank you, brother. Ridgeway Leatherworks. Rob, where can people find you? They want to reach out. They want to check out your products. Where can they get you? Where can they find you?
Sure, no problem. Website's ridgewayleatherworks.com. Ridgeway Leatherworks on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. All that standard fare.
You're so savvy. I like it.
I know. I miss you, buddy.
I miss you too.
We got to get together soon.
So listen, this has been long overdue. I know we blame COVID for everything, but it did slow down our New Jersey meetup that we were talking about doing. So I think that's got to be in the cards this year. I know you and I talked about it briefly, and I said, let's stay on top of that. I could definitely go for a cigar and a cocktail with a lot of my friends. And you certainly are a guy that's long overdue and haven't shared one with you. So listen, man, thank you for giving me an hour today. I think your insight today was powerful, and I think a lot of people are going to get something out of this episode. So thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
Awesome. Love you, buddy. No problem.
Good. Don't go anywhere. Stay right here. We'll chat offline. Just when I wrap up, I just got to do the closing, okay? Good. Everyone, thanks for tuning in for another stellar episode of the National Fire Radio Podcast. Rob Meyer from Ridgeway Leatherworks, an incredible discussion on firefighter-owned businesses, the do's and don'ts, the things you need to do, and just some all-around advice on how to succeed. Rob's doing a bang-up job with his company, and he's a dear friend, and I appreciate him. So do me a favor, take this conversation, take it back to the firehouse, and talk about it, because when we talk about the job, we are making the job better. Don't forget to email us, podcast@nationalfireradio.com, with all your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions about the podcast. And thanks for tuning in. We appreciate your loyalty and support. We'll see you at the next one. Jeremy, National Fire Radio. National Fire Radio.